Welcome to the Taconic Outdoor Education Center. Today, we're going to be talking about amphibians. Amphibians are a big group of animals, much like mammals, reptiles, or birds. Amphibians often have soft, slimy skin, spend different parts of their lives on land and in water, and go through a body-changing process called metamorphosis. Amphibians are also ectothermic, sometimes called cold-blooded, which means that they can't heat themselves and have to use things in their surroundings, like the sun, for warmth. We have lots of different amphibians around here, including a bunch of different frogs and salamanders. But what about toads and newts? They're also amphibians, but all toads are kinds of frogs and all newts are kinds of salamanders. Normally, we think of toads as frogs that live on land, and newts as salamanders that live only in water. But nature likes to make things complicated. The truth is, what distinguishes toads from other frogs and newts from other salamanders is tricky and hard to define. We're going to be taking a look at some amphibians that we can find out in nature. In the process, you're going to see us handling a couple of different species. We made sure to do this the right way, so that we don't hurt the amphibians. We don't recommend trying this at home, because their skin is very sensitive. Here, we have one of the most common salamanders found in New York State, the Redbacked Salamander. They like to hide under rocks or logs in the woods. Redbacked salamanders are one of the few amphibians that lack an aquatic stage, so they lay their eggs on land, and the adults keep watch on their eggs until they hatch. Some amphibians, such as salamanders, share a surface-level resemblance with reptiles like lizards. They have the same general shape, and they're even both ectothermic, meaning they get their heat from their environment, but in reality, they're very different. Lizards actually share a more recent common ancestor with you than with a salamander. One of the biggest differences between reptiles and amphibians is the skin. Reptiles have scales, and their skin feels dry and often rough. Amphibians, however, have slimy skin that they can use to breathe. Some species of salamanders, including the redbacked salamander, don't have any lungs at all. They breathe exclusively through their skin. The word amphibian was originally used to describe something that lives both on land and in the water. This suits modern amphibians rather well. Not all amphibians live in water, but they do need to make sure their skin doesn't dry out. Many amphibians will live near bodies of water, like lakes or ponds, but those that don't still need to find a way to keep moist. Some, such as mole salamanders, live the majority of their lives underground and beneath the dead leaves in the forest. Others, like our local green frogs, live in and out of the water. Some, like the eastern hellbender, another New York salamander, live a fully aquatic life. Nearly all amphibians lay eggs, like these ones here. Unlike bird or reptile eggs, these eggs are soft and lack a hard shell. This leaves them fragile and vulnerable to drying out. Because of this, many amphibians lay eggs in water that hatch into water-breathing larvae, like tadpoles. Amphibians that don't lay their eggs in water have to find a nice moist spot to hide them in to prevent them from drying out. This area here has more of a current, which amphibians try to avoid when laying their eggs. The current could damage their eggs or wash them away. Amphibians prefer quieter spots, like this area off to the side, where there's less flow. Behind me is a vernal pool. These are great places for amphibians to lay their eggs. A vernal pool is a body of water that fills up seasonally and usually dries out before the summer. These are great for amphibians to lay their eggs in because they don't have to worry about fish eating them. There are still other predators that will go after the eggs, but it's fewer to worry about. In addition, there's lots of leaf litter for them to hide. Rainy days might be a pain for us, but they're helpful to amphibians when they're migrating. The rain helps keep their skin moist as they move from place to place. Amphibian migrations usually follow these guidelines. After the ground thaws out from the winter, the first few rainy nights with temperatures above 40 degrees Fahrenheit will see lots of amphibians migrating. My fellow educator Liam went out on a night like that to look for salamanders crossing the roads. Here, we can see what he found. During the spring and summer, you might hear loud sounds coming from a swamp or pond. These are the mating calls that many amphibians use to attract a mate. The long-term calling comes from frogs that breed in what we call prolonged breeding. These are species that breed over long periods of time throughout their season. Other frogs, such as the spring peeper, are explosive breeders. Spring peepers are frogs that breed in the spring vernal pools and have a relatively distinct breeding season of a few months. Most amphibians hatch from eggs as larvae. A larva is a young form that's very different from the adult. In frogs, these are often called tadpoles or pollywogs. These words come from Middle English roots. The pole and poly come from the word for head. Tad comes from toad, and wog comes from wiggle. So tadpole means toad head, and pollywog means wiggle head. Both terms are rather descriptive for what they look like. A while after the larvae hatch, they will undergo the process of metamorphosis, through which they will change from the little fish-like larvae into the adult form. The tail will shrink, and in some cases, like frogs, it'll disappear entirely. Legs will start to grow. In some cases, the tadpole will shrink as it metamorphoses. During metamorphosis, the entire respiratory system can change. Most amphibian larvae breathe through gills, but these can be replaced with lungs and a system to breathe through the skin. Another local species, the red-spotted newt, has 3 stages. The first is the aquatic larva stage, typical of many amphibians. Next, the newt will grow into a bright red-orange juvenile stage, the land-dwelling eft. Eventually, the eft will return to the water and go through metamorphosis again to change into the aquatic adult stage. Amphibians play an important role in their environments. They often act as both predators and prey, keeping insect populations under control and providing a source of food for other species. Amphibians are also frequently considered ecological indicators. These are species that react strongly to the environment, so the health of the local population tells us about the health of the local habitat. They have some specific needs for reproducing, and their skin is delicate and sensitive to toxins like pollution. Also, being ectotherms, they're particularly vulnerable to environmental changes that affect the temperature. The first step to helping out the amphibians is protecting our vital wetlands. Check out these organizations that are dedicated to this important work. Another way to make a difference is to help our local amphibians while they're migrating. Because a lot of their habitats have been broken up by human construction, many amphibians need to make a dangerous journey across roads from their winter homes to where they breed. Try to watch out for the kinds of nights that amphibians migrate. If you have to go out, please be careful and keep an eye out for them. If you want to learn more about how to help our migrating amphibians, the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation has a project that both helps amphibians migrate and keeps track of their numbers. Consider volunteering to help keep our amphibians safe. Thanks for learning with us. We've loved having the opportunity to share what we know with all of you. We hope you learned something cool about this awesome group of animals. Take care.